Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Feonix Insider, where we talk about all things mobility innovation, health equity, and the work that we do to break down barriers and access to transportation every day. So my name is Valerie Loeffler, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Feonix Mobility Rising. And today on our show, boy, you are in for a treat. We are so excited to share with you about our Michigan Ride Paratransit project. This project we've been doing for about 3 years, and it was funded by the Michigan Department of Transportation and the Regional Transit Authority of Southeast Michigan. This project was also a finalist with the ITS America Mobility on Demand Awards. With us today, we have several guests from SMART, one of the public transit agencies that were a part of this program, SCEDGO, the technology partner that worked on the initiative, and also the Feonix team, who worked directly hand in hand, literally with some of the passengers who used the technology. And we're going to talk about this program from where it began to where we are now and how it maybe could influence your organization and pilots that you're doing. First, I'd like to bring up on the screen our partners with SMART. Daniel, Leslie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, well, Daniel, Leslie, welcome. Go ahead and just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your work and your role at SMART.
So thank you, Valerie, for having us. So I'm Daniel Whitehouse. I'm SMART's ADA and Paratransit Manager. I have been part of this project from the beginning. We'll talk a little bit about the history and how we came to this point. But I've had the pleasure of seeing this from its infancy all the way to where we are today.
Thank you so much for coming, Daniel. We're honored to have you.
Good morning, and I'm Leslie Verstraete, the Supervisor of Mobility Services at SMART, which is overseeing our ADA department, sort of a new role for me, but I've been at SMART for 4 years, and I did planning before that. So service development, service improvement projects, data collection. And so that's what I was doing when we started this project back in 2019, before the pandemic. And it's been a great project so far.
Awesome. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for joining us and your expertise, and excited to talk about this program. For anybody who's watching who's not familiar with SMART, do you mind, Daniel or Leslie, giving an overview of just the depth and the breadth? I think one of the most incredible things that blows me away about y'all's services is you really have a vast portfolio of programs and services available throughout the community.
Yes. So very good question, Valerie. So SMART operates within Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, just outside of Detroit, Michigan. We cover 1,100 square miles of service area. We are in 79 different communities.
Wow.
SMART operates anywhere from 85 to 90 directly operated paratransit vehicles in a given day. We also have a vast fixed route service of, I think, about 40 plus fixed routes covering those 3 counties and that square mileage. SMART also has a unique program called a community partnership program, where those communities that are participating with SMART will get vehicles through us and some funding to provide service. So they help provide service to residents within each community and set forth their service hours, service area. We have about another 300 of those vehicles that are available to the community partners. There's 57 community partners, and some cover multiple cities. So when you look at all of that, in addition to SMART's new microtransit service, which is covering 5 different zones, SMART really has a vast operation and different hats that we're wearing to ensure that we can provide service to the region. Leslie, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think you covered all of them. Yeah, lots of different, that's sort of why we started this project, which I know we'll talk about next, but we have a lot of different services, a lot of different providers, and they all overlap a bit. So,
and so, with that in mind, with the breadth and the depth of programs that you guys have and the services that you offer and the communities that you're impacting, how did this project come to fruition? I know it's definitely, like all pilots through the pandemic, been through some twists and some turns and some ebbs and some flows as all transit did during this time. But, just kind of share how did this begin and where we are now?
Yeah, so a few years ago, Smart, Ann Arbor, and DDOT came to a nice little round table, and we learned that there was a program or a pilot funding opportunity to try a new project. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would be a good project that would benefit the entire Metro Detroit region. 3 different transit authorities using 3 different softwares, but the common underlines were riders. You had paratransit riders, ADA riders, and all 3. Excuse me. And there was a lot of overlap between riders. So riders would ride between Smart and DDOT, DDOT to try and get to Ann Arbor, some going to the VA, or from Smart service area to Ann Arbor. So we started looking at all of our operations, and if there was anything on the operational side that we could collaborate and find one way to improve it, or a way to improve that one thing, or multiple things if they tied in. And one of the things that we talked about initially was a unified ADA application. There were some logistical issues with that, obviously with how certain authorities do have certain compliances and non-compliances with ADA. The second thing that we all talked about was, at that time, nobody really had a passenger app. So every rider who was calling in was having to go through a call center. And when riders would ride between different services, those calls, a basic call of setting up one trip, could take 40 or 50 minutes. And it was really a big pain point for riders. With certain disabilities, just the ability to be on that phone call is very tiresome or troublesome. But just the time commitment, when you think of a rider doing something that should be so basic of, hey, I'm being picked up in Detroit, I need to go to the suburbs, or vice versa, having a call that could take longer than the trip itself really didn't make a lot of sense. So we started moving forward with the idea of let's find an application, or create an application that would allow riders to do those trip requests virtually or in an online portal, and then the agency would do the back end work and relay the information on the trip details back to the rider. And this really became a good savings for both parties. From the passenger side, the not having to be on the phone, not having to wait for each agency to answer the phone or go through that process, allowed them more independence with their day, a lot of flexibility. They could also submit those trip requests at any point in the day. So they weren't now bound by the call center hours of Smart and DDOT, or Smart in Ann Arbor, or DDOT in Ann Arbor. From the transit authority side, with those trips coming in, it allowed our staff to enter those trips and work those back-end logistical schematics out when we had the opportunity. So we didn't have to drop everything for a phone call that could go 40 or 50 minutes, where we have other things going on, as does everybody else. So the flexibility, like I said, on both the user end and the transit end, was going to be benefited by a project like this. So we went through the next steps. We kind of went through a really big interview process that was pretty in depth. That there were a lot of factors to consider. How would this work? Could it coordinate with the softwares? We learned that was going to be a trouble of coordinating with 3 different softwares, but through that, the 3 different authorities still committed to this project, because the rider would still benefit and the authorities could adjust. And like I said earlier, having them just log into this portal, see the trip, handle the trip when they want, we aren't just bound by having to be fixated on a phone line or dedicated to something. So we were able on the authority end to make the correct adjustments. And from the passenger standpoint, like I said, the flexibility for them has been tremendous. So we took the next steps. We met with, we had a consultant that we worked with, Menlo Innovations. Really sat down with all the authorities and looked at the technology angles, did a lot of good interviewing, then did passenger interviews, to see what was necessary to make this project be successful. And through using Menlo resources at the Metro or the Detroit RTA, and then working with Feonix in the end, we were really able to shape this and put it all together and launch it and make the tweaks necessary to have this grow and be a successful program for a lot of riders.
That is that's a great description of the program from soup to nuts. I mean, that covered it all. I think that is one of the things, when you were talking, it came through, it reminded me of is just the flexibility for the passenger to be able to book rides any time of day. And I think when we're seeing those rides come in at 9 p.m. or at 2 a.m, sometimes it's, somebody's getting up or waking up in the middle of the night going, oh yeah, I need to do that. And then on top of it, when they're booking those rides, I think there was somebody who booked like 13 rides in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And the time that would tie up a customer support agent to book those rides being on the phone, I think that's also a great benefit. So, when we're looking at what you guys, from your perspective, are seeing as benefits to the riders as well as to the agency, Leslie, Daniel, what would you say are your top 3 that you're like, we did a lot of things, we explored, we tried a lot of different things. What, from your perspective, brought the biggest value in this pilot context?
Well, for one, the benefit to the rider is, like you said, booking the trips anytime. I also think it's a huge benefit that they can see their trips that they booked. It's on there. They can go back in and say, oh, did I book that trip for next week to my doctor's? They can go back in. Oh, yes, I did. Is it scheduled? Is it pending? That's always there, and their times are there. Instead of calling over the phone and just writing it down on, like a sticky note and potentially losing or forgetting their trip. We did allow them to cancel on the app as well. So I think that could be a benefit as well.
And to tie into what Leslie said, being able to see the trips is huge. It also cuts down those additional follow-up phone calls of, I called yesterday for a trip, and now you're having to call 2 agencies to see, did both of them schedule their end? So being able to see when that trip is done, being able to get that information and see the 2 different pickup windows cuts down on subsequent calls. So it's not just that initial call that could be 40, 50, an hour, 2 hours, depending on the number of trips you're putting in. Yeah. But it's the follow-up of getting the information on each trip that becomes a huge savings for the rider. From the authority, it's the same thing, right? It's fewer phone calls from the initial phone call that we talked about a few times, the length of that phone call, but it's also reducing those follow-up calls too, and allowing SMART representatives to then dedicate, and DDOT representatives to dedicate time to other riders who maybe don't know about the app or are new to the programs, and so, or who couldn't use the app for various reasons. So you see that benefit from the rider and then from the transit agency. I think the other big thing is the capabilities of using screen readers and other applications that don't have that technology, where we know that there are a few users who are coordinating it or integrating a screen reader with this technology. And we have met with a number of software vendors who don't have that capability. So now we offer some flexibility for riders who don't want to use the call center, can't use the call center maybe, and need an accessory to their mobile device. And so we kind of stand out in this project compared to other softwares that we could have used.
Absolutely. I think in looking at the stats at one point during the pilot, almost a fourth of the beta users were using screen readers to access the app, and about another third of the passengers were using a wheelchair as part of their mobility aids. And I think when we're talking about paratransit and customization and meeting riders where they're at and what they need, I think those modifications really do make a big difference. And I think for an agency as large as SMART is, and that has so many different services, to take something like this on goes to show that this isn't something that is limited to these niche markets, that this is something that, really can be a commitment to equity and a commitment to community access, and really moving and pushing the bar forward for other organizations to say, hey, this is possible. It's not a dream. It is It is, and we've done it. So, there's been a number of things since this project has come to fruition, and now you're moving into another kind of the next phase of this. How important have the learnings from this pilot project been to the organization in, just operations, but also perhaps informing future projects?
Oh, very good question. So one of the things that we have learned from this is what we need in the region, the new technologies that are out there, and getting riders exposed to them, and then hearing their feedback, hearing what works, hearing what doesn't work, has allowed Smart, as we move forward and Smart begins launching some projects to upgrade its overall technology in every sense of the matter, right? Fixed route, ADA paratransit, even microtransit, and getting a sense of what's out there and what's new and where the market's going. A project like this allows us to put our specs together and know what does our rider need, what does our rider expect going forward, and that allows us to make productive and successful choices in vendors going forward, and making sure that the next phases of this project, the next phases of the technology upgrades for Smart and for DDOT, bring in those lessons that we've learned from this project. So this was very valuable. That you talk about pilots that are good learning opportunities, and Smart has been very fortunate that we've had this project and we've had another one that have both offered us a lot of good feedback and allowed Leslie, myself, and the rest of the Smart team to really know what we need to do, what the riders expect, and how we become successul. One of the things that I failed to mention was a benefit earlier that is really big. Is it's not using this app hasn't just benefited riders, but we have riders who have others calling on their behalf, or others who are managing their trips for them. And so, having the ability for that person who may work a 7 to 5 job and still have to call or request trips for someone going to dialysis or medical appointments, or even work themselves, having an app and having the ability to request trips outside of those normal call center hours, again, that's a benefit to the rider, but it's also a benefit to the person who is helping that person. That could be a social worker or a family member. We've seen different varieties of how that's gone. So that's a big lesson as we go forward too, is making sure that we have the technology in place, that it's user friendly, not only for the rider, but for representative. In some cases, we've seen where children are having to book trips. Maybe there's a language barrier. And so the child, being able to do this, well, if they have to go to school and they have time constraints, having a platform where they can request trips for somebody else outside of his normal call center hours really improves the region, improves the user experience, and opens up independence for the riders.
Absolutely. And I think that element of the caregiver we saw several times in really critical times. And I think even especially during the pandemic, I think one of the customers that we had talked to, she was a nurse and she was working 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week at one point in time. And she's booking rides for her aunt, trying to get to dialysis and follow-up appointments and things like that. And so it's just to be able to see how this can improve the quality of life for the caregiver. Again, going back to Leslie Reesing, being able to see, did I book that trip? I can't remember. I haven't slept in a week. Is she set up? Is everything okay? And so I think that's really incredible. And I appreciate you bringing that up. So Danielle, Leslie, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
No.
All right. Well, Danielle, Leslie, thank you so much for sharing about the project. We will see you here in a few minutes. We're going to hear from Skedgo and a member of the Feonix team on the passenger perspectives a little bit more, but we'll talk to you in a second. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring John on. Welcome, John.
Hey, Valerie. Thanks for having me on. It's very interesting listening to the previous speakers. When we build these solutions, we build them for our customers. So we're not always dealing directly with the end user. And it's really rewarding to hear that it's delivering that sort of value and it's benefiting these communities. So hopefully over the next couple of minutes, I can tell you a little bit about Skedgo.
Yeah, John, do you mind just kind of kicking it off and introducing yourself? What's your
Yeah,
background? What's your role in SCEDGO? Tell us a little bit
sure.
about John.
Yeah, John Newton. I'm the CEO of SCEDGO. We're an Australian incorporated business, but I'm operating out of Helsinki. So I won't even try and explain what I'm doing up here, but I'm operating in the European market. And our business, we describe ourselves as a mass enabler, which I guess is a bit of industry jargon. Effectively, what we do is we create mobility solutions. I should explain, when I talk about mobility solutions, we talk about mobility as a service, which is a new emerging industry that puts the commuter, or as you described, the rider, at the center of the transport ecosystem. And our challenge is to enable those riders to make informed decisions and make it easier for them to create these journey plans.
Absolutely. And so, John, tell us a little bit about SCEDGO. Being a MOS enabler, what do you see as the value add in this kind of a scenario where we're looking at potentially multiple software integrations, we're looking at large regions, multiple geofenced areas, customizations, those kind of things. Tell us a little bit about how SCEDGO navigates this really sophisticated ecosystem to put that rider really at the forefront.
Yeah, it is quite a complex area. What we do is we create these mobility solutions that enable the riders to plan, book, and pay for what we call trip chains or journey plans. And these journey plans, we provide preference-based options for them. They can decide whether they want to reduce their carbon emissions, their cost, their time to destination, or increase their active travel. However, one important component is that we deliver wheelchair routing, and we deliver customizations and localization for specialist communities or cohorts. In this case, we look to service those people with disabilities, paratransit passengers, or even disadvantaged communities. So effectively, as you know, as we've done for Feonix Mobility Rising, is that we localize, we customize, and we create a technical solution that meets the needs of your customers or your riders.
And I think that's one of the unique components of working with SCEDGO is you guys have not only a really great customization, because a lot of times when we work with a vendor and there's a technology, it's like, this is it, boom. It's not accessible, too bad. Oh, that feature doesn't work. Well, there's another $400,000, and so to be able to work with a vendor that I think it has such a commitment to accessibility and to transport equity is really important for a nonprofit like Feonix when we're trying to develop these partnerships to really get the most value and support for these communities and these, in many cases, underserved populations. And so can you describe the technology that we deployed as part of this project in particular? Because I think that the component of where it can be agnostic, so where SMART maybe have one deployment of technology and maybe DDOT has another, and maybe each of those agencies has 3 different services that passenger could be deployed on or could be riding on. So tell us a little bit about that platform.
Yeah, I think you've struck on a couple of key words there. We do describe ourselves as agnostic, and what I mean by that is that we have a core competency. Our strength is in the planning component, but we do provide an end-to-end solution. As I said, users can plan, book, and pay for these journey plans. But the secret here is that every community, every town, every city is unique. And so when you have a large, let's just call a simple journey planner like Google, it's a one size fits all. It works really well. But when you get into a community and you've got to deal with different suppliers, different transport modes, different technologies that you want to integrate into the solution, this is where SCEDGO comes to the fore, because we work closely with our customers to ensure that the system or the solution, the technologies work in the way that you want it to work. Because you're obviously trying to deliver some sort of value or some benefit to your users. And we've heard the term learning experience a few times already in this conversation. It's certainly been a learning experience for us as well. We too have worked with Menlo on the screen readers. We've adjusted our ergonomic workflows. We've done a lot of work on the back end of the solution to enable the type of transactions and the type of bookings that you've described earlier. And for us, it just adds value to our platform. And so we're really excited to be working on these projects.
And so from your perspective, what impacts has this project had just in how you design technology in general? I know that SCEDGO participates in a number of really important global initiatives and accessibility and innovation in this space. And, this project was such a close focus on accessibility and screen readers and, just making sure we have those customizations for designating mobility devices that are needed. And so I know that from the learnings of this program, in particular, Feonix is deploying a program in Nevada statewide. And there's so many things that we learned in this project that are benefiting in that initiative. So do you mind sharing, from the learnings here, is this benefited other apps or other projects or in general?
Oh, absolutely. We've always had an eye on the accessibility market. I mean, it's important to us. In actual fact, we have 2 directors in the organization that have disabilities, mobility disabilities. And so we've always had a strong interest or a strong commitment to that market. But working with Feonix Mobility Rising on these projects, we've got a much deeper understanding of the requirements. This is not our area of expertise, but we've been able to adjust to these. So we also look at accessibility and inclusiveness. We talk about those disabled communities. The ability just to be able to pay for a trip, to plan and pay for a trip seems simple to us, but it's a difficult exercise for a lot of people. So we've adopted a lot of these changes, these things that are described earlier, like the ergonomic workflows and the back-end development, and that it will be propagated through our system for other opportunities to be able to reuse that technology, to utilize the learnings that we've gone through is really important to us. And I think what it does is it brings down the barrier to entry. We have the ability to lower the cost in future because we can replicate what we've developed for Feonix Mobility Rising. So I think that's the main thing is the learning experience we've gone through. Just simple things like organizing the ability to pay, to book and pay, and to aggregate those demand response transit assets and the volunteer vehicles, etc. It's quite a challenge for Mariano and Jemina and our technical team in Argentina, but I think we've come up with a really good solution.
Absolutely. And I think, John, the conversation around the importance of that user-centered design and how that's possible in this framework, and going back to with SMART and how this project has come to fruition, I think when the funding for this project originated, it came from the Michigan Department of Transportation to the Regional Transit Authority. And I think the benefits of this technology and this pilot and what it provided for this program, but also other pilots within the region and across the country and perhaps around the world, I think shows where we're at as an industry, where we're really learning together, we're pushing the bar, and we're seeing, we can do better, and we know, and we are. And I think that's really great. So, John, is there anything else that you would like to share about the program, the project, your team, anything in general about what this project has done or in general?
I think the only thing I'd add is that I know internationally this is getting a lot of attention. It's a high-profile project. I mean, it's only a small little solution that we've created, but people are struggling, or transit agencies and cities around the world are struggling with the same challenges. And one of those is that it has to be inclusive. You've got to be able to include all members of the community. So this is not a financial debate or an analysis on return on investment. This is just delivering the core services. I think Sandra Witzel, our CMO, put it best, is access to transport is access to life. And that's so true. And so I think it's very commendable that people launch these POCs, and it enables us to push our technical boundaries out a little bit more. But it certainly does benefit all these communities that we service.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your support on the program and the project and all that we do. So thank you so much.
No, thank you again. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So give me a second here and I will bring T up. T, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So T, tell us a little bit about who you are and your role at Feonix and your role in this project.
My name is Talaro Ramsey. I am the Community Development Manager here at Feonix Mobility Rising. I played many roles in this project. In this project, I pretty much project managed it once I jumped in. I kind of jumped in the middle of the project, but from that point on all the way to the end, I was very hands-on with this project.
So T, with the project, one of the things that you had the opportunity to do was really dig in when it came to the customer perspective and the customer testing as we were rolling out the software, working with different passengers on that first person user experience, even in some cases going to passengers' houses and sitting side by side and saying, okay, let's test this out. Let's see what's happening. Let's get that user experience. Because I think when we first started this project and during the middle of the pandemic, we couldn't visit their house.
Right.
That would be a bit much, right? And so we were doing, in some cases, this phone relay because you can't have the screen reader on at the same time you have like the phone audio running on a call, right? And so we would give directions to the passenger and say, okay, try this, and then call us back. And so one single user testing session, in some cases when we were testing out where to go and what to do when this was first being rolled out, was over an hour and a half. And so tell us a little bit about your experience working with passengers on the technology, and then what some of their feedback was when they were talking about this.
Well, working with the technology, and let me say first that this was a personal venture for me because I have dealt with the transportation issues in the past, especially on the paratransit side. So just that point made this thing really important for me. But to deal with the passengers who had to use this, I've had multiple users and a multitude of users with different variations of disabilities. So we wanted to make sure that we covered all of those things. We had some people that were blind that were using the screen readers. We had people with different maybe hand disabilities where they couldn't use their hands for whatever reason. So we had people in wheelchairs. So and they may have been, it might have been a remote wheelchair. So they had multiple issues that we had to cover to make sure that everybody could use this app in the same way. So with meeting with them, I also learned a few additional things that were needed that I didn't know about before. A screen reader wasn't the issue with me, previously, but with dealing with some of my people that may have been visually impaired, that they needed the screen reader. So the screen reader was a great aid and for it to function as if they're just reading a book, as if they didn't have any visual impairments, made this thing great. So touching with them, learning that process, learning those needs and giving them what they needed was the greatest outcome and a benefit to everybody that can use this app.
From the perspective of the passengers in the service, what were some of the maybe intangible things that were shared by the passengers about what this app did for them? So having this access to technology, I know Daniel and Leslie shared a little bit earlier in the show, the impact that they'd heard third party, but from your perspective, what were some of the things that you heard from some of the passengers?
I mean, just to be point blank, it was just, it increased the quality of living, just to be honest with you. It made things very easy where they could go on and just use the app. They didn't have to call in and be on hold for an hour and a half to book one trip. Sometimes they would be on hold and the phone would hang up. So they didn't have to worry about those issues at any point. And if there was an issue within the app where, say, maybe we've had times where addresses would pop up or business name would pop up on the app, they could easily email somebody. They could easily do that within the app and get that feedback and get those issues resolved. And if they had to call in, that would be the last case scenario. That was far and in between. So I think making their life easy was the benefit of utilizing this app and building this app. And that's from their end and from my end personally, because again, I've had personal experience with it.
And I think that access to life and this quality of life upgrade that this app enables for users, it really does ring true. And I think we've heard that over and over again. I remember one user who was using the paratransit, and with this app, she said, I feel like I could actually use this to also like do things like go to the movies. Whereas before it was like, I really should ration how much I use the service. And I really just want to limit it to these super essential trips. But now with the ease of the ability to use this technology, I could do some of those ancillary, some of those other quality of life things where sometimes just getting out with friends and being able to do some of those things, is just as important to mental health as some of the doctor visits, I think, in some cases. So appreciate your feedback on that. Anything else, T, before we wrap up and bring Daniel and Leslie on board about your experience in this project and feedback from passengers?
I mean, yeah, just to add what you just spoke on, I have one guy who says, hey, I can't get the address to the grocery store and to the fitness, to Planet Fitness. So he sent me the Planet Fitness he wanted to go to, and I sent him the address, and we got that thing resolved, and he was able to go to Planet Fitness on a regular basis and go to his favorite grocery store, which is Randazzo, the fruit market. He loves going there. So that just shows, that this app goes beyond just a doctor visit, just going to dialysis, just going to, get your eyes checked. It's really a life enhancing app to age people in more ways than what we have, that we probably don't think about. We all just go get in our car and go where we want to go. But for people with some disabilities, they can't do that. So this enables them to do that just as easily as we can. As far as me, I love this project. Actually, it was in my wheelhouse, so I was able to do some tech stuff. I was able to do some community outreach, some engaging with people, and just building those relationships with people personally in their own lives. I mean, I even went to some people's homes, so that was cool, and I really enjoyed it.
T, we really appreciate all the hard work that you put in on this project and connecting with the passengers and the community and just really making this personal. I think that Planet Fitness example is a really great component of like, this truly is access to life. It's not just, urgent critical appointments, but it's how you can live your best life. And right. I think with the technology, that is one of the unique things, I think, going back to the innovation that we found with SCEDGO, is we could modify the region and we could modify the area of the paratransit service area unique to each service. I think that's one thing that we've run into in other apps and things like that, is it has to be a certain county or it has to be a certain city. Specific geofences many times aren't an option. And so I think that was really a great way to bring that out, is that, how the service area is carved out and how that is set up can be customized as well. So as these places are built, as our communities are changing, as our rate services are updated, those kind of things can be deployed. So T, right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, one more thing also, I must say that Menlo and SCEDGO they were great in this process, because I was kind of on them about getting a few things done, and they delivered, way beyond what I even imagined. So this whole process was really great, and the team was great, and thank everyone who was a part of it.
Thank you, T. We appreciate all your hard work. And I will echo those statements also about SCEDGO and Menlo. So, all right. Well, we are coming up on time, and we are going to bring up Daniel and Leslie for just some final remarks about the technology. And, what advice would you give other transit agencies that are looking at doing pilots around accessibility or are looking at doing pilots of this nature? I think Michigan DOT really went out on a big stage and said, when they launched this program, we deploy a lot of money on innovation and mobility, but so much of that goes for these really glamorous, high-end kind of cutting-edge stuff that is really limited to a subset of the population. And they said, let's take an innovative challenge and direct it specifically for vulnerable and underserved communities and make sure we can support individuals with disabilities and veterans and older adults and things like that. So I think that was really the first time I'd seen in a state DOT really roll out, if you will, a red carpet for mobility innovation specifically directed at this space. So, what advice would you have from a transit agency's perspective for other organizations who are looking at pilots of this nature?
So we were given a piece of advice after we launched this that really makes a lot of sense, and Valerie and her team and Menlo did a great job, and that's including your users, getting their feedback. Leslie and I and other transit professionals, we know the back end. We know what we need to have work to get the trip scheduled, but involving your users of what they need is key in this. When you're looking to partner with somebody, look at it as making sure it's a true partnership, that they're looking at not only your needs as the agency, but also the rider's needs. And are they willing to make adjustments to make sure that both ends are what they need to be? In this case, we had a wonderful experience with that. Feonix Mobility, Menlo, everybody integrated what the users' struggles were, what they needed in this, and worked to make that successful. And on our end, it was the same perspective, is everything that the problems that we may have ran into or updates that we'd like to see were integrated as well. So making sure that vendor or that vendor you choose is a partnership, and also don't be afraid to get creative. There's no harm, and it may be scary to build from the ground up, but in some cases it may be the right thing for your authority. Finding that partnership that may have, some good components that work for your region, and working to build up the rest of the software might be the way to go. Don't just feel you're just going to buy what's out there because it's already built. You want to bring in all those components of your agency, your philosophy, your region, and the abilities and drive of that technology vendor to make this a successful project.
I was going to say the same exact thing. A lot of public engagement and testing. Yes. Always, test it over and over and over again. We learned invaluable things from our riders and built the app from the ground up. So.
And during that, and Leslie, we've learned that in another project, it's more than just involving them too. It's finding ways to touch them individually with that product, right? So my limitations in a software might be different than Leslie's limitations, and having that training staff who can identify each individual's needs really goes a long way. If you just do a basic training, somebody who may struggle within that, or multiple people may struggle, but for different reasons. So being able to identify that and do a follow-up of saying, okay, you need help with the fare payment, you need help with downloading or creating the account, and just having the ability and the time and the patience to do those different types of trainings and not just do a cookie cutter, one fits all.
Yeah, I think that creativity is definitely the key word that resonates over and over again. And this is getting outside of the box and really saying, let's focus on what the rider is looking for. Let's focus on what the dispatchers or the schedulers that are also using the platform. Let's look at what kind of data we need to find and really just, demand more, if you will, from your team, from your passengers. Because I really think what was inspiring to us on this project also was you could really tell the relationship that SMART has with its passengers. We don't always necessarily go into, when we're working with transit agencies and start reaching out to the passengers, they're like, well, my feedback doesn't matter. I don't, really want to do this survey, or I'm not really interested in this pilot because nothing ever changes. And we really had incredible feedback from the passengers that we worked with. You could tell that they felt their voice mattered and that it's a part of the culture of the transit agency. And so we were just really honored to have this opportunity to work with your passengers and really learn and how this can inform policy in the future. You know, we talk about accessible vehicles, we talk about accessible curbs, we talk about all these things, but accessible technology should also be on the table and should be almost a, you know, is this a policy impact that we should look at? We talk about Title VI. We want to make sure language is available, but we also need to make sure the innovation is accessible. So any final words, Daniel, Leslie, as we wrap up our time here today? It's been such a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure too. We can't thank you and the rest of the team and everybody involved in this project for the hard work and dedication to be successful and to improve the Metro Detroit region. It's been a great opportunity.
Yes, working with Feonix has been great. So thank you.
Thank you.